Yeah, it's the only building on a university or college campus in the entire country named Veterans Hall. Now, there are other buildings on campuses that are named after, prominent individuals who served in the military
and then
so
donated
forth.
A bunch of money.
Right. But to actually have it titled Veterans Hall and knowing that name is always going to be on the building just says, that critical and reinforces that notion. From our very opening in 1947, when 3/4 of our students were returning from World War II as veterans,
right,
and starting as a GI Bill school to where we are today, that's our support and our service and our way to give back to those that have given so much to our country. And
Bill Kawczynski is the Director of Military Affairs at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. He is a Marine Corps veteran who has supported the highest levels of decision-making. In this episode, he provides some fantastic advice for veterans to succeed and insights into his career supporting student veterans. All of our podcasts will be available on all major streaming platforms, and of course, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. While you're there, check out the description section and follow NDS Show on your favorite social media app. Enjoy the show. Oh, Bill, how did you get to be where you're at? Tell me about that.
Interesting story with that. So, Gulf War broke out. I was working part-time at a medical clinic while I was going to school in northwestern Wisconsin, and there was a retired naval intelligence officer who I worked under, and one conversation led to another, and he's like, you'd be a great intel analyst in whatever branch, and you should think about doing this. And it was right about, movies coming out, Harrison Ford, Patriot Games, and all this other. And, I was a geography major, history minor, and all those things were kind of intriguing and so forth. But, my father served in Korea. My younger brother was in the Marines. And I'm like, maybe this does kind of sound interesting. So went through the process, and I knew at the end, even if I did military service, my end goal was to maybe work for one of the 3-letter agencies doing kind of analyst work. And so I was at a smaller school, and they didn't really recruit at our school. So I'm like, well, usually the only way I'm going to be able to do this is go through military, get intel background, and work my way up. And so Andy Kozan helped me out with that, facilitated a few things. Next thing I know, I'm standing on the yellow footprints in San Diego and was in the intel field and spent 5 years at Camp Lejeune, 2MEF G2, and 2nd Surveillance, Reconnaissance, and Intelligence Group, and just had an interesting, time in service. But, it was one of those where, all of those woulda, shoulda, couldas that we always ask when you're in the military. Well, I never went in to make a career out of it. But, hindsight was like, God, I would have been retired by now and everything else. But I met so many interesting and just highly capable individuals from all levels. And it really kind of developed what I was wanting to do post-military. And so at the time, I was like, well, my wife had a budding career. We had talked about a lot of things. I got to do my military stuff. She sacrificed. I'm like, okay, it's time for me to kind of allow that other process. And so decided to get out of the Marines. And I was looking, had some opportunities up in DC, but young child, and it just didn't fit for me of where I came from and what I wanted to really do in that kind of environment. Applied at UNCW Wilmington, and lo and behold, got a role in the Science and Math Education Center. And I'm like, okay, I've got a degree in education, teaching, secondary ed, but nothing in science and math. It was all art side of the house and social sciences. And I'm like, oh God, this is going to be interesting. But that's where I really learned about university structure, about research, and the science fields and how critical they are for our youth. And had a blast doing that for 13 years at UNCW. And my best friend that I was in the Marines with, he had retired out, and he was working as a GS, I think, 14 at Rock Island Arsenal. And that was about 3-4 hours from where I grew up. And I was like, yeah, I kind of always thought about maybe going back home or somewhere close to home. So, my son could see his relatives and so forth. So out of blue, he's like, hey, send me your resume. So I'm thinking, oh, he's got a position for me. Right. So I sent him a resume, and about an hour later, I'm getting interviewed from a guy from Baghdad asking me if I'm interested in being a database administrator for this new kind of unit that they needed to oversee all the private security contractors. And I was like, huh?
Right.
What? Yeah. And I'm like, Matt, you didn't tell me nothing. And so went through that interview for about 30 minutes, and the guy's like, well, I need a decision by, tomorrow if you're in. And it's a 13-month contract, heading over to Baghdad, 2008 and 9. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is pretty quick. And so quickly got off that conversation, went and talked with my wife at the time, and she's like, yeah, go ahead and do it. But a lot of military folks, when you're in and then when you get out, you always have that scrolled in the back of your mind of like, do I still have it? Do I still have those skills? It's kind of like a quarterback or someone else, when they hang it up, well, maybe I should have played another year. And so I always wondered if I still had, the intel skills. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so there I was 2 weeks later, off to lovely Baghdad for 13 months. And
this was 2008?
2008 and 9. So interesting enough, I was in the green zone for most of the time there, and that was actually the worst place to be because the 120s and 240s are being lobbed in all day long, and but it was such a unique learning experience. The office that we had reported to the G3, who reported to General Petraeus, who reported straight to Congress. So it was very high vis, high level, and what we were responsible for was to rein in all the private security contractors after Blackwater had their incident. And so, there's 35,000 operating in country without any rules, no frag orders, nothing. And, that was our role. And so it was very high stress, high speed, long hours. But you got to interface with government Iraq officials, Department of State, DOD. And so you really started to learn like the big picture. So we actually had a station in the Strategic Operations Command, so all the different levels and where the war basically was fought. And so I can see on the video screens, there's like 16 of them, and I'm watching live stuff over here. Here's the news, that's going on, and NBC or Fox, Al Jazeera, and so you're listening to what each one is talking about. When you just watched it live a little bit ago, it's like, where did they get their info from? This is not even correct at all, or it's like, not quite. But, it was just interesting to see how the war effort was going between that and the Department of State, because at the time they were still building the embassy in Baghdad. So Saddam's palace was split in half between Department of State on one side and Department of Defense on the other. And so this huge complex, and you're walking around.
Was this the Al-Fa Palace?
No, that was Saddam's kind of like personal retreat palace. This was the one.
That's
right
where I was. That's where I was.
So I was in Al-Fa, and it got the $1 million chandeliers and all that stuff. Yeah, and that private lake that he had.
Oh yeah,
around,
There's all these fish there that if you walk over the bridge every day, you could throw some crumbs in there, and there's a million koi fish. They just be swarming in there.
So I did a little time for meetings and things in Al-Fa, but we were mostly in Saddam's palace in Baghdad proper. So, just the opulence of everything. I mean, gold-plated fixtures. You saw it and you're like, how in the world? I mean, it was just amazing.
That man loved some gold. Didn't
he did. He did. And chandeliers. I mean, everything else. And, it was interesting because we had a mix in our office. So there were 4 of us kind of civilians with 3 or 4 regular Army. And so collectively in this small little office, we ran all the operations for both static and routes and everything else. And so our end goal was, how do we get private security contractors to understand that you don't need to be squeezing off rounds in somebody's vehicle because they're coming up behind you, without actually employing some, other techniques that would say, hey, you're getting a little too close, just back off, and, things, as well as, at all the sites out there. It's, we investigated negligent discharges, just any little thing that was going on.
What was the craziest thing that happened while you were there?
I mean, unless you were there to understand how different their mindset was for the Iraqis, to them, enchilada, it's like God's will and everything. So do I look right or left walking across the street before I just step out onto the street? Well, you're in New York City or someplace. Yeah, you're going to be looking right, left before you step out. You're going to get run over. To them, if they got run over, well, it's God's will. So they had
surely God would expect you to look left or right.
Yeah.
Right?
You would think that, but then they're going to join their 71, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because their safety procedures were like null and void. So, for instance, we had the ballast in the office there, and we needed light fixtures changed out. So these guys would come in, pull down the light fixture, not turn off the juice, wet their fingers, pull the wires together, and just start wiring everything live.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, here's live wires right next to a shower room, and it's like water everywhere. And it's like, guys, and then they would put up scaffolding in order to repair the wall that got damaged from, some rounds, whatever. So they'd have, a piece of 2x4 with a shoe and a bucket and everything else that this, scaffolding that's 5 stories high, it is resting on. And this thing's, rocking, and you're just like, oh yeah, just go up there. And I'm like, I ain't going up that thing.
Right.
But they just didn't understand stuff like that. So, we had some deaths that occurred because
there's no OSHA in Iraq.
No, there wasn't. And, after I got done with that particular contract that I was on, I stayed on for a little bit longer and then worked for the same company, but they had a lot of contracts building power generation plants, schools, hospitals, and so forth. So the idea was they would hire a lot of Iraqis, show them how to build and do the proper safety procedures and everything else. So I was writing training manuals on proper procedures for OSHA and everything else, safety, health, the whole 9 yards. And, how do you go and bid on a contract? And, these guys, I got my brother, he comes take theirs. We just give him a bribe. I'm like, no, you can't do that. You got to have, this is all good. It's all good. And it's like, no. And then all the safety stuff too. And it's like, just didn't understand, that. But we add in all of the military side of the house and then kind of the humanitarian side of the house. You start watching a country that had been leveled, slowly starting to be rebuilt from the ground up. And, you're interfacing with, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Defense, government of Iraq officials, private security contractors, and country managers from all over the world. So we had South Africans, Australians, New Zealanders, Brits, Americans, all over the place. And so you're trying to navigate that landscape, but get them all to understand, hey, this is the defined mission here. And, you can't be operating like the Wild West like it used to be. And so at the end of the day, a lot of lives were end up being saved. And so as difficult of, a job it was, you felt like you did accomplish something meaningful. And at the end of the day, it's something that did make a difference. So it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Try to keep the mic a little bit
closer.
You can either move it or you want to try to stay about a fist length away. So how was that transition from a contractor again to where you're at now as the director of military affairs?
So that was a big gamble on my part because going from a very safe, secure, state job that, I absolutely loved for 13 years. Now I'm a contractor, which means I got paid an awful lot of money.
Right.
Having to do my own taxes, file this and all that other. So after the contract ended, I was actually offered another 6 months to stay on. I was going to get promoted, but I was like, I had young kids, I've been gone for 13 months, missed all the holidays, birthdays, anniversary, the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, nah, it's just time for me to come back. Unfortunately, when I came back was when downturn in the economy, 2009, 10, it was so now there was nothing available here. And so I kind of temped for a little while back at the university. I tried to come back to university. They just didn't have anything for me. And I'm like, well, I did bank some good money. I'll just kind of stay at home and
hang out for a bit.
Hang out for a little bit. So because of some of the skill sets that I developed while in Iraq, I was applying for a lot of positions, and I ended up getting interviewed for a position at Kafir Community College. And so they needed somebody to kind of oversee their Penner campuses, but also all their workforce development and training with business and industry. And so kind of fit right perfectly into what I had just previously done. And so I worked for Kafir for a couple of years, learned, a lot from the community side of the house, but also how do you deal with business industry and making sure they're getting the necessary trainings and tools and things they need to be not only competitive, but to grow their business and so forth and be successful.
Cape Fear is a great school. I actually, after I left the military, I went to Cape Fear Community College in finished up my AA degree, which is what forced UNCW to allow me in.
There you go. Because the articulation agreement, which is great.
Yeah.
So I met some great folks there. I had fun for about two plus years, and but then the university was like kind of calling me back. They had this new position that was in the chancellor's office doing community partnerships. So I'm like, so I had done all that previously, working with schools and a lot of nonprofits, and then Cape Fear, I was out in the community doing all this other stuff. I'm like, oh, this is kind of a perfect blend of what I've been doing for like the last 10, 15 years. So I came back to university and previously for those 13 years, I was kind of like on the back of campus. So you didn't come to the front of campus where senior administration was very often. And I didn't really see that side of how the structure of the university operated. So now going from where I was to like the chancellor's office, now I'm involved, I'm listening, I'm learning like how universities really run. And you always listen.
I'd be interested to learn about that.
Well,
are there some similarities between the way our university is run to the way the military is
very,
run?
very similar in some respects. There's a lot of misnomers like, oh, you're in the chancellor's office, you must be, getting fed, steak and lobster every day and having, carte blanche. No, people there in, the administrative building, they work just as hard. They're, just at a different level. But at the end of the day, they're people just like us, and they have a different role, a specific role to fulfill. But
I have one of my favorite sayings of all time. One of my favorite sayings is that everybody poops.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to be coy or anything. It just means that we're all people.
Yeah, you put your pant legs on one leg at a time, whatever, same as anyone else. And
we all have, trying to, I guess you could say, climb a certain social ladder, or at least get to a certain level of comfort in our own lives. I don't care what level you're at. There's no reason to have a massive ego and be a jerk. I was lucky enough to meet Chancellor Sartorelli a few times, and just super nice guy. I mean, had great conversations with him and super humble. And I hope the new one is the same.
Yeah. So what's interesting about what you were kind of alluding to there is people see one side of an individual because, they're the lead of the organization, and, they have to have a certain persona as well because, you're at a very high level. You have to interface with business and industry leaders, elected officials, the whole nine yards. But what they don't see is that kind of personal side to somebody at that level. And so before Chancellor Sartorelli came, Chancellor Miller was very personal about always wanting to know, hey, how's the family doing? How do you need help with the kids or, this or that? And he's always asking students, what's next for you here? I mean, just taking that personal interest in, no matter if you were a faculty, staff, or the student. And a lot of times that doesn't get conveyed to the, faculty or other staff that don't see that. So I saw, Chancellor Miller when he came and went, and then we had an interim chancellor, Cedarburg, who was, a complete opposite personality-wise of, the previous chancellors. And knowing that he was only in that one-year interim role, he was just kind of like a breath of fresh air, just upbeat, lively, and so forth. And then, watching as the search unfolded for Chancellor Sartorelli. And so when Chancellor Sartorelli came in, I was kind of tasked for partly putting together kind of like the welcome packets for him, like for he and Mrs. Sartorelli, Kathy. And so it was like, here's all the elected leaders and what they look like, their roles, where they're from. Here's all, the business and industry. Here's all the school. And so it just helped them, get a better grasp on what this community was like. So, felt like I was doing a pre-deployment brief or something like that for the CEO, as the new chancellor's coming in. But again, chancellor
kind of is because they get their own house.
Yeah,
so
you
get your own house. It's a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I had very in-depth one-on-one conversations and car rides with Chancellor Sartorelli, and again, I mean, guys lived all over the world at some of the highest levels of positions and so forth. Very well read. He's got like a 10,000 book library of stuff, and just unique stories that he's had from years of living in the Far East, the Middle East, Latin America, all over the place. And so I got to see that and hear that side from him, but we'd have some very in-depth conversations and stuff. And so that was kind of unique and stuff. But now our current chancellor, Chancellor Valetti, I'm just so excited about serving
Mhm.
under his leadership because he had obviously, as you know, been the previous dean. And so I worked with him on a lot of things and was part of the provost leadership team as well as the other deans. And so I developed a personal relationship with him and his family before
Right.
he's, went down
That's
the
good.
And so it's one of those where, yes, I have kind of a personal friendship, but I have the ultimate respect for him as our senior leader and his role as chancellor. And, it's just like knowing
Mhm.
a general on the side, but then also, providing
Right.
that respect for somebody that's, attained the level that they have. And so I'm excited about his vision for the
Right.
university, the way he approaches his day-to-day routines and his huge support of our military veteran populations here. And so for me, that's very exciting and reassuring as well, because you
Right.
never know when the
Yeah,
new
yeah.
leader comes in,
Yeah.
are they going to support the same things that, you're operating under? And that's not a concern, which is, so reassuring for what I'm trying to accomplish within our office, but also, our greater community. And so,
Right.
that people will see through somebody if they say one thing and don't back it up or anything else. But I
Yeah.
don't think that's ever going to be an issue here.
So that brings up a great point. I'd like to learn a little bit about Veterans Hall and how that became a thing. So Veterans Hall at University of North Carolina, Wilmington, as far as I know, is the only building without a name on it other than Veterans. Is that going to get changed to
So yeah,
Bill Kawczynski Hall?
No, not. And that's the whole beauty of the foresight and wisdom of our leaders back when the idea of hopefully getting funding to have our quad, our health sciences quad, and that's what it's kind of termed is. So you have McNeil Hall, you have the teaching lab, and then Veterans Hall. So those kind of like 4 buildings per se really completes a health sciences quad. And that was kind of the long-term strategic plan that the university developed years ago. That's what they had wanted because the health sciences area is such a huge need for our populace. Right. Amount of nurses, psychologists, health professionals, anyone in those, social workers, all that is such a great need. We can't turn out enough students to meet the needs of society. And so having, Veterans Hall there. And so at first it was called the Allied Health Building. And then you're always going to okay, it'll stay Allied Health Building until they can find somebody that's going to give a lot of money to the university to put their name up on there. Well, we had a couple trustees who thought that, well, maybe we should name this Veterans Hall. And they did their research. And as you stated, yeah, it's the only building on a university or college campus in the entire country named Veterans Hall. Now, there are other buildings on campuses that are named after, prominent individuals who served in the military
and then
so
donated
forth.
A bunch of money.
Right. But to actually have it titled Veterans Hall and knowing that name is always going to be on the building just says, that critical and reinforces that notion. From our very opening in 1947, when 3/4 of our students were returning from World War II as veterans,
right,
and starting as a GI Bill school to where we are today, that's our support and our service and our way to give back to those that have given so much to our country. And so for me, it's just being able to come into work each day, and you see that name up there, but know that I'm part of something that is very unique. But at the end of the day, it reinforces what our mission is to our students and our community that, hey, we're here to serve you.
And is that where the Office of Military Affairs is at, I assume?
So that is correct. So when we got approval through the bond issue that we were going to get this building, then it started working with the architects. So we actually had the Dean of the College of Health and Human Services, which was Charlie Hardy at the time, and the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, which was Eswani Valetti at the time, and then our office, all meeting to figure out what's going to go in this building. How are we going to design this building? And the interesting thing with UNCW is that obviously every building on campus has that Georgian architecture, all looks the same.
It's a beautiful campus.
Right. Beautiful. And so did we want to have the same interior look to the building as a lot of the other ones, your cinder block walls that are painted in your classrooms and so forth? Or did we want to have something that really defines this building and its really importance to not just the community, but to the students that we're turning out through the programs? And so Dean Hardy and Valetti, traveled around, looked at some of the newer buildings around the country and how they were doing allied health. And so everything was very intentional, very interdisciplinary, very collaborative. In fact, when most buildings, are built, usually the dean's suite and everything else has got like the,
right,
primo real estate for the building, the best views. No, the best views in the building are actually for students. And it's that kind of sky bridge that kind of bridges.
That's the way it should be.
And that's exactly it. And so the whole idea was, let's have these interdisciplinary problem-based learning rooms. There's 10 of them in that bridge there that promotes students to come together, talk, work with the graduate students or their faculty to come up with solutions to problems that they're given to, how you solve this or how do you, and so to see how the facility is laid out and the importance of the programs that are in there, we do an awful lot with the military. And it's exciting for me now to be that kind of bridge for faculty that have an interest and have certain expertise to get them to understand that they can do research with the Department of Defense, with our veteran populations, as opposed to maybe just, NSF funding or typical NOAA or NIH. And so now we're doing just that. So we're branching out with a lot of opportunities, working for and with DoD entities, which obviously, touches me, for somebody that, serve time, but it solves a great problem. We're helping the military. We're getting our students, a lot of them that are military, to be a part of the research. Faculty are getting funded to do this, and so everybody wins.
Yeah.
And so our students and our future students, I think, are really starting to see that this building really is a draw, not just having the name Veterans Hall, but it's what's happening within the building and that greater health sciences quad that really is promoting what we hope.
I think it's awesome that it's named Veterans Hall. The school could probably name anything, based on their donations. But when I was going to school there, military affairs was just like in some back office near, I think, the library somewhere.
Yeah.
And it would be really welcoming as someone coming out of the military or maybe even still serving that wants to go to school to just have a place that's like, oh, that's my home. That's where I go, because, veterans have unique issues dealing with finance. GI Bill is kind of a funky thing. How do these grants work? Typically military students are a little bit older, right? So what are maybe some of the other issues that?
So I'm glad you brought that up.
Helpful?
So back in 2016, I was still working in the chancellor's office, and I was at a conference for community engagement. And while I was there, I got an email from the chancellor that said, "Hey, Bill, I'm thinking about appointing you as director of military affairs. See me when you return." I'm like, military affairs? What the heck is that? There was no office of that. Okay. So I ended up getting back from the conference, and I go into his office, and he said, "Sit down." So he and the provost were sitting there, and he's like, "Look, I want to create an office of military affairs. I want to appoint you as the director. And what I want you to do is I want you to serve more of our military students. We're next to the 2 largest military installations in the world. We need to be serving more of these individuals that have served us." So he was, increase enrollment numbers for them, which is what you want to do, but, obviously programs and so forth. So I gladly jumped at the opportunity. This is like, you kidding me? This is a dream job. And then I realized after he had said that, he said, "Oh, by the way, in 2 weeks, you're going to brief the board of trustees on what the new Office of Military Affairs is and what it's going to do." And I'm like, "Oh, great. Okay." So I'm this new director. I don't have any office space. I don't have any staff or personnel. I don't have a budget. And I've got to brief the trustees in 2 weeks on what it is this new office is going to do and how they're going to do it. So I'm literally flying the plane as, I'm building it, so to speak.
It's like a startup.
Yeah, exactly. And so again, but I think it was a combination of all my previous roles that I've had building up to this that gave me some specific skill sets, but also sitting in that chancellor's office and seeing how things operate that if I didn't have any of that, there's no way I don't think I could have done this successfully. And so I thought about it long and hard, and I came up with kind of 5 domains that I thought I needed to concentrate on. And after I came up with those, I went back to the chancellor and I said, "Sir, I got to tell you right off the start here, though, yes, I accepted this role, but I can't in good faith honor your immediate request to bring in more students and doing more for them until I can figure out who our current students are and helping them first. Because if I can't take care of the ones we currently have, how am I going to do that for more than I'm bringing in? And so that actually opened up.
About what year was this?
2016.
Okay.
So
how many students were at UNCW then?
We were, around 14,000 or so. And what I was able to get from our institutional research, we were about 1,500 military students that they knew of. And so his goal was in his 5 years for his strategic plan was to get military students to 2,000 students.
Right.
So within a year and a half, we got to 2,000 students.
Nice.
And it was a matter of now, because I had been at the university and I knew all the different, departments and players and key areas, how do I kind of collaborate and use the structure of the university as this great team in order to bring in more students, but also provide the necessary resources and services. So we had a very small space inside Warwick Center, was our original office space. And I mean, it was situated in a perfect position because right across the way was the Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid, where like all the GI Bill information and certified officials were at. It was by parking and student accounts and cashiers. And so it was a good location. It was just really small. So at best, we could fit about 20, 22 people in there. And, I wasn't complaining, but, we tried to make the space kind of like a little mini USO as much as we could.
Right.
And very successful. After 2 years, we won a national award for being the top educational institution for military students. And, that was just, a combination of everybody at the university all collaborating and figuring this out. And so, was so proud to fly to San Diego on a national conference and get this top award amongst all these universities and stuff. And so we had some new programs that, through great staff that I had working with, we brought some national programs. We were the first Hiring Our Heroes program with U.S. Chamber to be at a university association, United States Army. We're the only university that has a subchapter here in North Carolina. But all these things were great things to bring to campus to open up, the aperture for, how do we serve these folks in a variety of capacities. So, we kept moving forward, but when we got in 2018, we're going to, build this brand new building. Now things started like, okay, what do we want to be in this new facility? It's going to be, Allied Health Building, and then obviously became Veterans Hall. And so I thought long and hard of the current facility that we were in and the challenges of space that we had. Now I've got, 5 times the space. Right. How do I partition this space out to make it the best useful space for our students? And so that was my chief concern. So I did a lot of, research myself, but I really wanted the focus of the space to be very high-end USO. So when you first come in, that first reception area, we're going to have somebody right there immediately. Hey, how can I help you? We're here to, serve you type of thing. Be very inviting. But knowing that we had a huge transfer population of commuting students.
Right.
So I wanted a nice kitchen that had the features they needed. So when they come to school, hey, drop off your food in the refrigerator. Here's a place to heat it up, or here's, we can cook and do all these other things. But I also wanted to have a space that's separated out from where people come to just, smoke and joke, so to speak, military stuff, to where we needed a quiet room all the way at the very end where some folks just need absolute quiet space.
A military safe space where we can curse loudly.
Yeah, and that does happen. And so there was times that I have to, put the curse jar out there. Hey, drop a $1 in the kitty for, we'll have a nice lunch one day from,
You have to keep the military safe space away from the normal student safe space.
Yeah. And, there were times when, you still have to like, hey, type of thing, earmuffs, type of stuff. But overall, though, the students that saw what the old space was like, ones that didn't have a space, like yourself, per se, and now what we have, it is just, it's night and day.
It's awesome.
It makes you want to come into work every day because at some point during the day, you're going to be helping out students in a time of need and also working with community members. So,
what types of problems and challenges are students coming to the office with?
I mean, obviously the first one is just that transition, because we all know when we've gone through that transition program, it is not really what it really needs to be. And to prepare you to go from military life to civilian life, and then for a lot of our students that are a little bit older, and it's been a while since they may have had classes. What's it like sitting next to an 18-year-old kid in a class who is a whiz bang in calculus or whatever, and it's been 8 years since you've had algebra. And, so those are some challenges. Obviously, GI Bill always has some challenges, and it's things that a lot of times we can't control on our end. We just can be that advocate in reaching out to the VA to say, hey, where's the disconnect? When's this coming through? Sometimes, the GI Bill doesn't pay for everything. And so, those are things that, we're very cognizant of, that, okay, we need to reach out and get some scholarship funds coming in, that in case, we've got an emergency. We had a student 2 semesters ago that, was a reservist, deployed, came back, and his apartment was broken into, stolen everything, laptop and everything else. And that's where his schoolwork was on. So how do we get him up and running? Okay, so we've got some emergency funds. We'll get him here. So
his dog really did eat his homework.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And so, just providing funds that got him back up on his feet, got him a new laptop so he can at least get to classes and still maintain some sense of, well, at least this is a common that I've got. I can come to school each day and I'll rebuild the apartment, and some of my belongings. But, how do we get them to come to campus? Because for a lot of these students, this is their job.
Right.
As opposed to, the 18-year-old kids are still trying to figure out life. These folks have already figured out life and then some. And so they consider coming to school as a career or a job. And so they want to come in, maximize their time, get through everything as quickly as possible, walk across that stage and either go on to grad school or get that job that they need, because a lot of them have families and responsibilities. So there are hiccups along the way. Life happens. And so that's where we come in and help them navigate not only the university, but also the community. And so developing a lot of great partnerships with a lot of our military and other community organizations is critical for the success of our operations, but the success for our students. And so that's where I'm really starting to focus an awful lot on, is out in the community and how we can partner with them to provide opportunities. And whether it's career paths, whether it's just internships, whether it's just knowing where to go when my car breaks down, who do I trust in town, where do I go?
Right.
Housing, the whole 9 yards. So
does the office ever deal with suicide?
Unfortunately, yes.
Has that been an issue?
And that's an issue that it's hard to talk to the other folks on campus about at times, because we have resources on campus, the counseling center that does provide those resources. But we all know most of the military folks don't trust anyone else other than somebody they know that can wants to hear them out. And so having access to those resources out in the community that are specifically interacting with the veteran population is important. So now I can make a quick referral. I know exactly. I can read somebody. I know when something's going on. People have confided in me. And so I will let our counseling center know that, hey, we've got some students that have some issues, but they're going to go see, these resources out in town, because they know how to understand that population and are probably going to get a quicker, return on interacting with them. And so
the university doesn't have mental health professionals
that
are meant for veterans necessarily?
So they do have mental health professionals, but you've got 18,000 students, so you have to come in and make an appointment. It's almost like going to VA, take a number and wait. And you can't do that sometimes with folks that are having issues because of maybe PTS or a TBI or anything else. And so just recognizing that, but we do provide a lot of what we call green zone training. So it's kind of a welcome to military 101. And we've done that for a lot of our faculty and staff. And that has been a difference maker for both our students, but also our faculty and staff. So they have a better understanding of the population. But now when those folks go through it and they get a sticker that goes up, on their wall or whatever else, our students can see green zone. So they know at least they've had some understanding of the military population and some of the issues. So it just tears down those little barriers, but lets them know that, hey, I don't know everything about the military, but I understand a lot of stuff. I'm here to listen. I'm here to help in whatever way I can and not judge you for, what may or may not have happened during your time frame while you served and so forth. So,
well, I definitely think it's an issue that all universities need to take a look at. And I have a statistic here: 57.3% of more veterans commit suicide than non-veterans. I mean, that's an astonishing number. You always hear the number 22 thrown around. You've seen it, 16 and 22 per day. One's too many, of course, and it's definitely an issue that for some reason or another, the military has just struggled with.
Well,
veterans have struggled with it.
You just brought up a topic so I'm involved in a new nonprofit that's being formed right now called the Veteran Resilience Project. And one of the statistics that had just come out, so 20 years of war between Iraq and Afghanistan, 20 years. We've lost 115,000 military service members to suicide in that 20 years. So nothing's changed. All the money, all the resources, the efforts that have gone in place to try to lower that number and provide the assistance, nothing seems to be working. And part of this Veterans Resilience Project that I'm involved in with, some retired generals, some retired officers, enlisted, just people that from all different branches have looked at this issue. They understand it, but part of the problem is there's 45,000 nonprofit veteran or military organizations operate in this country, but they're all operating kind of siloed independently. Yeah. And that's part of the issue here is that, we have still high rates here locally, homelessness and a lot of other stuff. We have a lot of great organizations locally, but nobody knows where's the clearinghouse? Who's my first, contact that will point me in the right direction? And sometimes it's, a warm handoff. And so that's kind of what this new resilience project is about, that we want to be that, medium that people call, contact, come to, and we'll help direct you to the appropriate need. And sometimes, resources and so forth. The Army, has done a great job with their resiliency in their 5 domains that they have. But one of the domains I think that they're critically missing is the financial career portion of it. You transitioned out of the military. What's one of the biggest concerns you have? Is okay, I've got this guaranteed check every 2 weeks. I got medical benefits, housing allowance, all these other things. Now all of a sudden, what do I do? How do I make up for that? So part of the problem I think that we have in our transition programs is a lot of the folks that work in those transition programs, the folks that were, retired sergeant majors or first sergeants or retired colonels or whatever. So they've gone from active role in the senior enlisted and officer ranks straight into this GS role, but they've never really stepped out and been out where the rubber meets the road and has actually had to make a payroll. And, and so part of that issue is they don't really get what's really needed on the financial or career side of the house to help these folks long before they transition out. And so if we did a better job of that, I think that would reduce a lot of the anxiety and things that go into how am I going to put food on the table, and things are crashing in on me here. But if you've got a good job and something you love to do and you've got the money coming in, that takes away a lot of the other issues that are, leading to, somebody going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. It's odd that in a lot of ways, the military community, the veteran community reflects society. If you look at most statistics on things like education are pretty similar to the rest of society, but for some reason, that one issue is just through the roof. But like you said, we've been at war for 20 years. I mean, we're losing a lot of veterans, more in suicide than we are in casualties. And it's sad. And if you're anyone out there that's listening and you're a veteran, you need some help. The Veterans Crisis Line is 988. It's a new thing. I don't know exactly when it started, but as opposed to 911, you can call 988 now. So that's a good thing to have out there. If you need
locally
help, call.
Locally for us, Tony Vivaldi with Save a Vet Now has done a phenomenal job. And he's managed to partner with Coastal Horizons. So Coastal Horizons does a lot of mental health, substance abuse counseling. They're in 58 counties in North Carolina. But through a partnership with them, if you're a veteran or family member and you're in that space where things are getting to the point where there's no going back, you can go in, won't be charged, you will be seen immediately, and the big worry with a lot of the veterans is, okay, this is going to be reported to the VA, so now this may affect my disability or whatever else. And so none of that will be reported to them. So it's just another option that our military folks have that, you may already have, caseworkers that you're working with the VA, and there's a lot of great ones there. VA's doing a lot. They're trying their best. But here's another entity out in town that's willing to see you, because a lot of the same issues that people have with mental health issues or substance abuse and all that are very, very similar to, what's happening in the military space. And so I think just people understanding that there are a variety of options out there, a variety of resources that they can choose, but please choose something, because at the end of the day, you'd rather be upright and moving forward than,
You don't need a permanent solution to a temporary problem. You always hear that.
Yes.
But I think it's a great thing they have this Veterans Crisis Line now at 988. So at least it's a step in the right direction. I wanted to ask about something else, actually. Sure. If you're a veteran student, you're coming out of the military, what's some advice you would give them to just be a successful student when they receive their education?
Excellent question. And this is one of the things that all of higher ed wrangles with their non-traditional students, your older students, is how do you try and offer and get these non-traditional students to accept all the resources and things that the university has. So if you're an 18 to 20-year-old, 22-year-old, first time away from home, you go to college campus, your world is just opened up immensely.
Right.
And it's not just on the academic side. It's all these other social and student affairs sides. So, there's 300 plus clubs and organizations on campus. If you can't find something out of one of those 300, whatever it is, to entertain you or get involved in and learn something new about, or a passion that you already had to carry on, you're not trying very hard. And so what we try to do, and the hardest thing is, how do you get, these students that are commuter students that may have a family or other outside responsibilities to still have somewhat of a normal college experience as much as you possibly can. So trying to get them involved in whether it's student government or, some recreation or exercise activities, club sports, intramurals, or just being involved in, a variety of different, academic programs outside of what they normally, a lot of our military students, because when they come, they already have some education, and so they're not right from, start one, base point, but we have honors programs. A lot of our military students have high GPAs, are perfect for an honors program, but they don't think about going into an honors program because they don't see themselves in that light.
Right.
But what do the honors programs offer? Very small classes, get your registration courses up front, professional draws and opportunities, and areas to have more group discussion, but on people that are on the same wavelength or have a lot of experiences. And so that has been a little bit of a challenge, but now, because we've been working with the honors program and we've had some successful military students come through, and it's like, hey, I was the top student in the Cameron School of Business and I went through the honors program. You guys need to think and consider this. It's an awesome opportunity, and a lot of them just don't see themselves in that light. So again, trying to provide as much of a normal, college experience for our military students as possible, and as well as, their spouse and dependents, that's critical.
What about mentally? Are veterans coming in? I'll just, maybe this was me. When I left the military, I definitely wasn't as humble as I am now. I thought I was hot shit. I got out of the military. I'm like, I've been to Iraq. I've done something in my life, and then I'm going and sitting in a classroom, listen to a lot of time professors that I thought, I disagreed with on certain things. What's that mentality like of a veteran that's going to school and do they need to eat some humble pie, help them get through?
I think eventually everyone eats a little slice of humble pie, and sometimes it happens right away up front. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And it's just from observing our students over all the years, and I know for some of them, they hate group projects with the younger kids because a lot of the younger kids procrastinate and wait until it's Sunday night at 9 o'clock. Well, hey, let's get together at the local watering hole. We can come up with it. It's like, no, I got to be up at 5 a.m. I got kids. I got a job. No, I want to get this organized and done because, the structure from the military, you're given a task, a mission, the course assignment, whatever it is, you're going to work on it, get it done and move on to the next thing. And so I think, that's always in the back of their mind. But sometimes I think when they come, they underestimate their skill sets and abilities that they actually acquired through either experience or just life. And so how do you tease that out and reinforce them that, hey, you got this? Hey, it's been, 8 years since I had a chemistry class. Okay, so go to a review session beforehand. And that's one of the other things. There's so many resources available that, their tuition is paying for. So you can go down to the tutoring center or learning center, and usually within a week of just being in there for free resources, you'll figure out where your one little problem is. And then all of a sudden, you're moving forward and you're not stressed out about failing a class. And I always tell the students, like, look, that 75 or 80% of the students that go to the tutoring center are students that aren't failing. It's students that are getting a B and want to learn how to get an A.
Right.
Because if you think about the professional schools, if you want to advance yourself to the next level, you got to have good grades. If you don't meet those good grades, you're not getting in. And so the difference between maybe you getting into that program is going from a B to an A minus. Well, let's figure out how that path is. And so a lot of them they're afraid to ask for, what are the resources or things that I need that can help me? And when they finally realize it, it's like, oh crap, why didn't I ask you before? Or why did you tell me about? Oh, I did tell you 1,000 times, you knucklehead. Jesus. Hello, McFly, you're not listening, but
How often does, and maybe this is a thing, maybe it's not, but you always hear about universities being ultra woke. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
How often does that come in conflict with military people? I have to imagine that most people coming out of the military are more right leaning, or at least center right.
More center, and a little bit to the center right. Yeah. And that's just a rub you see all the time. And you'll get the student will come back and, again, coming back to that safe space, in our space, and like, God, I was just in this class, just frustrated how he has no idea what he's talking about, or she doesn't, force me into this stuff. And I'm like, calm down. Let's talk about this here. And, how did it unfold and so forth. But, I think that's something that society in general, and it's pervasive on university campuses just because, it gets the spotlight a little bit more than sometimes workplace or somewhere else. But I think as an institution or as a country, we've lost the ability to just have good discourse. I remember growing up and watching, going to a family reunion or, a holiday dinner and watching, aunts and uncles talk about stuff that they didn't get heated, but, they talked about stuff because they were polar opposites and stuff. But they had good discourse.
Passionate, but not personal.
Yeah, exactly. And agree to disagree. And that always kind of seemed to be the norm. And that is just totally being, I think, thrown out right now. And it's either you're for this or you're not. And if you're not, guess what? We're going to throw the book at you. And UNCW has been pretty good about that. But, I've got colleagues and friends at other institutions and places I know. And it's like, oh, my gosh, it's just bad. And, and you hate for that to happen because, if you're old enough and you've grown up to where you've watched, even in politics, where, you had a right or left folks talking and, they can agree to disagree, but it was good discourse. Now it is just either you're for this or if you're not, we're going to dig into your back family history and we're going to pull up something from 30 years ago that you may or may not have said or done. And now we're going to tear you a new one. And I was, wow. Yeah. That just, I guess, maybe I'm thankful that there were no cell phones and things back when I was going to school. I don't know. But, maybe there was something that I did. I said, I don't know. But, it's like, it's just it's difficult. And I think the military sees it a little bit more readily than normal students just because they've had the experience of being out and about. They've had a worldly experience. And so, it's one thing to talk about stuff about what's happening somewhere else in the world, but if you've actually been there, witnessed it, seen it, being a part of it, it's so different than if you just read it on a news clip or in some book or something like that. It's
opinions formed through experience are real opinions.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. So just every time I hear about some new, protest or something like that, I know the universities are always, I shouldn't say the university, I should say the student populace.
Sure.
And there might be a lot of left-leaning, or say left-leaning, super far left university professors. I'm always wondering about, that student that was like me. When I was at school, there's zero chance I would be able to not say anything about these things. It just wouldn't happen. I would there's no way I could sit there and let somebody, say that this race of people can't go to school today or something like that. There's zero chance that I would have been able to put up with that. It's so whenever I see that now, I'm just like, man, what is happening? Why is this mentality seeped into our universities? The university is supposed to be universal knowledge, right? It's supposed to be a place where people can go not just to learn, but to grow and evolve their opinions, to learn about things that have happened in the world. And, that should be the most open place for discussion that exists.
Exactly.
It should be the most open place for anyone with an opinion to voice that opinion. And, people that have served in the military typically have some strong opinions.
That they do. And the longer they served, it most definitely.
Yeah. So I've just always thought about like how that interaction occurs at the university level. Kind of along the same lines, but in a different use case of wokeness, I guess you could say. They're changing the name of Fort Bragg to Fort Liberty. Right. Now, I'll give you my thought on this.
Sure.
I'd like to hear what you think.
Yeah. So
I don't know how this came about, but it's decided probably by some politicians or something like that they're going to change the name of Fort Bragg to Fort Liberty.
Right.
Now, I was just reading a news article that was from WRAL, and it says, according to the final report from the Naming Commission, the total cost for all changeovers will cost around $20 million.
And we all know in the government context that if that's the figure they provided in the initial report, it's going to probably be 25 or 30 million or
and this
even
you're
more.
Talking about businesses that have to change signs.
Yes.
You're talking about highways that, they have to go, somebody's got to go out there and change it. All of the buildings, the maps that have to be updated. Let me tell you about updating a map. It's not easy. And when you have to update 1,000 maps or whatever it is, probably more than that. I mean, we're talking about a major cost just to change the name of a base. And I get it. Braxton Bragg probably wasn't the greatest guy that existed. Nobody in history was. But, at what point do we say, hey, if I have to pay for this wokeness, I want to have a voice here. Look, this is going to come out of our state taxes, right?
Yep.
They're definitely going to tax you and me for it. But what are your thoughts on this crazy?
Yeah, it's interesting because over the last few years, with us having a subchapter of the Braxton Bragg chapter of the Association of United States Army, so I've had more interactions of being over at Fort Bragg and being at command events and things. And so I've silently listened to those that are, served a long time ago and are like opposed to the change. And then obviously I listen to the new ones that are like, no, we're going to make this change. And, what is the, for the special operations, Oppresso de
Libertad or
something like that.
It's
so
Latin.
Free the oppressed. And so, liberty is I think an appropriate name for the operations there. But as somebody that, has studied history, I've been to where Braxton Bragg came from down in Mobile, Alabama area before. came up to North Carolina. So I've read a lot of the history. He wasn't a very successful military tactician, or lost a lot of stuff. But when I was reading up on a lot of the history of the Bragg name, there's actually a first cousin that was a general in the Union Army, same last name, who ended up being a congressman from Wisconsin, implemented so many programs that were such a positive influence on, getting rid of slavery, just so many unique and wonderful things that, well, what if you just kept the last name but changed the first name? Got rid of Braxton and used this individual who fought on the side.
Nobody calls it Fort Braxton Bragg. It's just Fort Bragg.
Right. Yeah. And so that was discussed from what I had heard. It just never was. And so, I can't change any of that. It's if that's the idea, sure. I'll fully honor and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. It's gotten to the point where, somebody that has studied history for a long time, again, that old adage of if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Right.
And so if you can't learn from mistakes, how are you going to learn? And so, I just saw where I think some statue at Princeton University, there was 200-300 students that complained because the first president or something of Princeton owned 2 slaves when they came here in the 1700s.
Right.
But they didn't read his full background of what he did and how he ended it. He was a minister and everything else. And so now they're in uproar, want to get rid of all the statues and put up a plaque that says, this guy did this and should be, whatever. Right. But again, that's a teachable moment that, somebody may have had that, but then they learned from everything else and spent the better part of their adult life and being at the head of an institution of higher ed that created opportunities that got rid of all of that. So do you get knocked for something you did when you're first growing up to learn,
right?
Or do you get credit for all the wonderful things you did post that one instant or whatever?
Well, I certainly think there's nothing wrong with having the discussion.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, we have, like here in Wilmington, we have these Confederate statues. I don't even, are they still up down there?
I think they're all been removed into a different location.
They've all been taken away into hiding.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having this discussion, right?
Sure,
with saying, look, do we really want to have these statues here? Do we really want this base to be named Fort Bragg?
Yeah.
But at a certain point, reality sinks in, right? And you have to say, okay, is it worth $20 million to change this name over here, or repurpose it or do something else?
Sure.
And who's to say that 5 years from now, liberty's not going to be offensive to somebody? It probably already is. There's probably somebody out there right now who's going, man, liberty's so offensive to me. Everyone just shouldn't have that. There's somebody out there that's acting like that. So
yeah, it's and that kind of reminds me of I watched a little reel on somebody that had talked about the recent release of Brittney Griner. And,
oh gosh,
and
don't get me started with that.
But that's an interesting thing to where somebody chastised our country, talked so negative about all the different things, and then turn around and has come back to like, oh, you got to get me out of something that was my own fault, what mess I got into. And, trading off her for, the
merchant of death.
It was like.
Brittney Griner is a basketball player in the WNBA, which is barely even a league that can exist because it's all financed by the NBA. The WNBA is so underfunded that I bought some floor tickets to a game up in DC a few years ago. One of the players called me and said, hey, thanks for coming to the game. I hope you had a good time. Would you like to buy season tickets?
Yeah.
That's how underfunded the WNBA is. It's only underfunded because nobody watches it. Now, I'm not bashing on WNBA. I had a great time.
Yeah.
I think anybody that likes basketball will really enjoy. There's some fantastic athletes.
Oh yeah,
but this is not necessarily a rant on the against the WNBA.
No.
But it's not like Brittney Griner is Michael Jordan, a universal icon of American success. She's a fantastic basketball player,
most definitely.
But this guy that they let out His nickname was the Merchant of Death. Look him up.
He could not wait to get involved now in what's going on in Ukraine.
This man is responsible for killing thousands of people through his weapons and arms deals. What I just, to me, it boggles the mind. I say it's the worst trade in sports history.
Yeah, that's been
Babe Ruth was once traded from the Boston Red Sox for a musical.
Yes.
To the New York Yankees. So,
and we all know what happened after the Yankees. So,
that turned out to be a pretty bad trade. Yeah. This one's worse. So,
but again, I think this goes back to kind of our earlier thoughts about not having good discourse, and right. I'm afraid that a lot of our youth today are growing up without that skill set, partly because they're so inundated with everything that takes place in that little contraption that's glued to their hand 24/7.
Right. Yeah.
They're interpersonal to begin with because they're always faced into, the phone and everything else. But, again, how do you have these conversations? You have some context and you have some, historical background, and you have some, good thought-provoking, discussions on stuff. And I think that's just so lacking.
Yeah, you want to have the discussions and you want to be open-minded.
Yes.
But I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, you want to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I feel like our brains have just fell out. I feel like so many people are just saying things that are ridiculous. I just, the things that I read, and of course, just like everybody, I'm on, the internets and the social media, libs of TikTok, if you ever go on there. It's just, it blows my mind. The things that people say and think, it's so wildly different than the way I think, which is fine. Not everybody needs to think like me, but it comes down to there's certain truths in the world, right? And there's a denial of truth happening at some of these on some of these accounts that is just so crazy to me. I'm like, how did we get here? But anyways, back to the, kind of the military stuff, which is really your expertise. You gave some great advice to a veteran that's going to school, kind of take advantage of your resources, go tutoring if you have to, look at those honors programs. Those are some fantastic tips and stuff like that. What message do you have for veterans out there, to help them succeed in life and just in general, because, you're successful. You're now the director of military affairs. It's a great position.
It is.
Hopefully you get a chance to help a lot of veterans and things like that. What message do you have for?
I think a lot of times people do their time in the service, they get out, and I don't think they fully realize all the different skill sets and things that they've acquired. And so sometimes they question themselves, they second guess. When you get to like university or a new job, or, hey, I'm not going to apply for that position. Why not? Well, it says it has here. And I'm like, okay, but you do realize that a lot of the stuff that you did in the military is very similar to this. Yeah, but I don't know how to describe that. They're just going to see, weapons training instructor or this or that. And I'm like, okay, let's back up. What role did you really do? You managed people, you managed equipment, you got people from point A to point B in a safe, in return and everything else. So that's one of the things that there are resources and there are individuals that have great expertise that can help navigate what you did in the military and how it equates to the civilian side of the house. And I'm sure you went through this just like I did. How do I adjust my resume? How do I write my resume from the things that I did in the military to translate it into somebody who's going to understand that I have some valuable skill sets. I'm going to show up on time. I don't do drugs. I'm going to be clean-natured. I'm going to give you 110% effort. I know how to work in a team in a diverse environment with the most, challenging conditions. And I'm going to have a smile on the face, and I'm going to work until the mission's done. Oh my God, how many people would, that are hiring out there would love to have somebody that knew how to describe that exactly.
Right.
And you look at so many positions that are open, and that's a frustrating thing to look around and you see You go into a fast food restaurant here and, a sign says, hiring, need help, $19 an hour, $20 an hour. And you walk in and
Right.
kids are scrolling on their phone, not helping. It takes 10, 15 minutes to get an order of a hamburger and french fries. It's just.
Well, a lot of the fast food places now just straight up, they close the interior. And
they're going to kiosks.
They just have the drive-through.
Yeah. Or they have a kiosk in there. You
kiosk.
just punch it in yourself and that's.
Yeah. Those jobs are done. I think robotics and AI, they'll figure that out pretty swiftly. There's already kitchens that exist where the robot just does everything.
And you were kind of equating to this a little bit earlier and getting to this point. And, I can't tell you how many times, just because, if you've been in a place long enough, you know enough people and the processes and everything else. And I have this little, secret, memory bank that every time I talk to a certain faculty member or a dean or associate dean, I said, man, I would love to have more of your military students in my class. Oh my God. It's just, when they're in there, they're kind of like my go-to person to ask a question. And a lot of them, it's like when they speak, the other students just kind of like pay attention and listen up and know it's coming from, a position of, hey, I've been there. I've actually done that.
Right.
And, to watch some of our students, become like the top student in this particular college for graduation. And, it's like, I feel so happy for them to know that, hey, the top kid in the Cameron School of Business or this program in the College of Health and Human Services just got recognized as a military student, because a lot of times they don't see themselves as being that top student, but to get rewarded in that, I love to highlight that and put it all over our webpage or in information out because it sends a definite message to all of our new students coming in. Hey, look, you got all the skill sets, abilities. This is you in 3 years, 2 years time frame. And that's where I want to see you because I know you can do it. And they start looking around. And it's like, oh God, this is, for, I think it was 2017 to 2019 for those 5 semesters, like 3 out of the 4 top students that graduated in like the business school were military students. And it was like,
that's awesome.
And would you think that would have been the case? And if you would have asked, or if you would have polled those students when they first arrived on campus, the top students in, College of Arts and Sciences program is military. That they would probably say, no, there's no way. So, trying to get them to understand you've got these, don't doubt yourself. Just like you tell them in the military, hey, you got this, you're going to do this, this, and this. I'll be back to check on you. Well, you're sure they're going to do it. And they believe in themselves because that's how you're trained and everything else. Just get them to understand that also applies to your education or your first job or anything else when you get out of the military. So,
okay, so for veterans out there, why should they choose UNCW specifically? Now we talked about Veterans Hall, which is pretty compelling.
That's a big draw, but I think it's the quality of the academic programs that we offer. A lot of your bigger name schools, and rightfully or wrong, there's nothing wrong with this, but when you get to a bigger name school, a lot of times your lower level and mid-level courses are taught by a grad student or a teaching assistant. Right. And there's nothing wrong. They're knowledgeable and everything else. But here at UNC Wilmington, almost entirely your faculty, your PhD, because they love to teach, are the ones teaching your class. And they put such a high emphasis on undergraduate research. So if you want to be involved in doing research with your faculty in whatever course, topic, area of interest that you have, those opportunities are encouraged at UNCW. And what that does is it gives you an opportunity to really have some face time with that faculty outside of just that lecture session. You're actually in a lab, you're working on a project, a mission, or whatever it may be, and you're getting real world experience. And then along the way, you may be part of a journal submission and publication or going to a state or national conference and presenting on the work that you've all collectively done. That's a resume builder. That's an opportunity for you to shine in a different area that you didn't think was possible because I was only restricted to just being in the classroom or maybe writing a paper or whatever it is. Or, well, that'll happen when I get to grad school. No, we cultivate that and support that here, that applied learning initiative and engagement, but also undergraduate research. And I can't tell you how many times that has been the difference maker for when the student wants to progress on to the next level is, hey, I've got in. Well, yeah, I've got all this already research experience
right.
and everything else that I've already had. Whereas you get to Chapel Hill or somewhere else, it's like, well, that doesn't happen until I'm in grad school.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'll add one thing to that, which is locally here in Wilmington, we have a great veteran community.
Oh God, yes.
You look at the Veteran Business Collective, which actually we have a chapter meeting here coming up.
Yep.
And it's a lot of fun. We all get together, hang out, drink beer too, network, and more importantly, help each other succeed. You see a lot of the businesses that are forming around that. And I think it's just we have a great veteran community here, and we're totally welcoming to the veterans.
It's interesting, right before Secretary Wilkie, after the election and then was no longer their secretary of the VA, I was at an event and I had met and had the opportunity to have multiple conversations with him over the years. And, he had stated back then that if nothing changes in the current track of how things are unfolding, North Carolina by 2030 will have the largest home to veterans in the country, overtaking California, Florida, Texas, and Virginia. The two fastest VA medical centers in the country are Wilmington and Fayetteville. That says something.
Oh, yeah.
And when you look at the number of military personnel that are coming here to southeastern North Carolina, and now obviously with the state finally approving the no tax on retirement stuff, it's just
a big deal. Yeah.
Oh, and it's a huge deal.
So
it's just
can you talk about that a little bit? Like what happened there?
As far as
what specifically, you said the state is no longer taxing.
So for a while, a lot of military retirees would obviously pick a state like Florida, Texas that didn't have, state tax on your income. And so you're on a fixed income when you retire out of the military. Hey, if you can get an economic advantage of $5,000-$10,000 a year and not getting taxed on, hey, that's important. So obviously our legislature had figured this out that, maybe that's the program we should implement, and they did a couple of years ago. And now I think they're seeing the huge returns on that critical legislative decision that, if we keep the people here, okay, we don't tax the retirement, but what are they going to do with that retirement money?
Yeah,
they're going to be spending it on all the goods and services and other things right here in the state and reinvesting in and so forth. And it turns into, their kids or grandkids going to school here and the whole 9 yards. And so I think that's another focus. Plus the fact that, we have Seymour Johnson, a wonderful Air Force base. We've got the Coast Guard in different sectors here. Obviously Camp Lejeune and Fort Bragg and so forth. There is so much here that, not just draws people here, but I think keeps them here. And
so if you're a veteran,
and
you're retiring, you want to move to North Carolina because you're not going to pay tax on your income.
Yep, that's correct.
So I just brought this up. So here in New Hanover County, we're roughly around 8% veterans here. That's a massive population of veterans.
I think it's higher than that. Brunswick County.
It probably is. This looks like this is from 2017.
Yeah.
This is from va.gov. And then the total veteran population, North Carolina ranks number 7 in total veteran population of around 730,000. But this is from 2017.
Correct.
And you see obviously the concentration near the military bases. So
that's where your resources at. So those things are all important. One of the things that the state has been working so diligently on the last 3-4 years, concerted wise and effort is, so we have like the third, largest military population, if you include active duty, reserve guard, and veteran in the country. But when it comes to bringing DoD dollars for investment in infrastructure and money.
Who's first and second? California and Texas, probably?
Yeah, Florida, Virginia.
These are just massive states anyways. Okay.
But we're like number 23 or number 26 in that. And so we've been working extremely hard. And I say there's a lot of different entities within North Carolina. And it's really starting to pay dividends. Having the right personnel there, Defense Alliance North Carolina, and Military Business Center, lots of different things. And it's just good to see this concerted effort, but getting people to talk about, well, how do we keep the jobs here in North Carolina? How do we bring, research dollars or DoD funds for certain things here in North Carolina? And apart from agriculture, that's the second biggest industry in North Carolina is the military.
Yeah.
what, $70 billion or close to that. I mean, it's no chump change, so we've got something really good going on here in North Carolina, especially here in southeastern North Carolina.
All right, one last thing I want to bring up, and then we can
Sure.
call it a day and move on with our lives. We're busy people. We all have things to do. So I have some information here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's interesting because you have high school graduates with no college. Veterans are roughly on point with non-veterans at around 29%. Where it gets interesting, though, is where it says some college, no degree. On veterans, you have about 23%, and on non-veterans, you have roughly around 19%. So that means there's a lot of veterans out there that have college, but they don't complete their degree.
Yeah.
And then if you go into associates, you have slightly higher bump for veterans, and then bachelor's degree is roughly on par with the rest of the population, around 19%. But what this data suggests is that there's a lot of veterans out there that just aren't a few things they can do to just complete their school,
Sure,
get that degree, which should obviously help with employment and things like that, aside from just being a good time in school and getting
that's actually
learning some things.
That's actually been for the last excuse me, about 3 or 4 years, the university system, so all 16 campuses, the legislature, have all been working on, there's about, out of the 10 million plus people that now reside in North Carolina, about 1 million of them have started some type of college, whether it's a community college or university, but never finished. So then push is, let's try to get these folks to somehow finish 2 or 4 year. And so what they're putting in is a lot of new pathways that, okay, I started school, 15 years ago, and life happened. I got a job. I was a business major, and now I'm working in a chemical company doing this. If I go back to school, am I going to have to take all these prerequisites to get back in? Do I really want to do business degree? I've been in chemistry or whatever it is. Right. So figuring out programs that they can offset that and still give you credit for, maybe you don't have to, we can do an interdisciplinary, degree to get you that final degree, because sometimes that's the only thing holding you back from getting a promotion is you don't have the actual degree. So they've been concentrating on this. From the military side of the house, again, life happens. And so is it a choice between putting bread on the table or going back to school? How am I going to finish? Do you think
the military, service in the military, should be equivalent of having a college degree?
I think it would be on the number of years that you have served, and it could be staggered. Not a full college degree, but bare minimum an associate's degree on certain things, especially if you've done, 8-10 years. I mean, definitely. But I think right now, one of the other areas that has been challenging, and the state is working extremely hard, and the university system is, and they're in the process of finalizing this, is there's no one set database or system that says, I went in the U.S. Army, made it all the way up to E6. I went to all these professional schools. What does that mean? What does that translate to? Now they're actually having a system that says, okay, you can quickly go in, punch in, okay, 9 years of service, U.S. Army. I've been to 17 different schoolhouses, certificates, programs here, and I'm interested in this program. Within a minute, it spits it out and says, okay, we'll give you 48 credits towards a degree in this, as opposed to you just getting, six credits or something else. So you're actually getting credit for prior learning. And they're understanding that a lot of these military trainings and schoolhouses, they just never had access to all the curriculum and what's really involved. Now having that and being vetted, I think that with the addition of the Forever GI Bill, because, these changes have all come out in the last, 4 years, that's now creating opportunities that, okay, may take me a little bit longer, but I am now going to finish because now I have a definite path. I'm getting actually credit for the things that I did. I no longer have an expiration date on those benefits education benefits that I earned, and I say earned because a lot of people think, oh, you were given those benefits. No, I earned those benefits.
I had to buy into the GI Bill.
Yeah, same here.
It was like $600 a month or something like that.
Yeah, Montgomery GI Bill back in
it wasn't cheap.
No.
So, okay. Obviously, somehow we have to pull the veterans back into the school. I could have a whole other discussion about whether we don't need to go to
part two sometime,
about the university system itself, and how that I believe that needs to be changed soup to nuts. But there's some great qualities to the current system, and you certainly wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But was there anything else you wanted to discuss before we hop off?
No, this has been been wonderful. I appreciate the opportunity. Always love engaging with you, Nick, and your background and interest and so forth. But you brought up some things here locally, like the Veterans Business Collective and a lot of military organizations, entities, and again, unless we have individuals like you that also support the military and veteran community, that's essential. And we need more businesses and industries and so forth to take a page out of your notebook and implement that in local communities, because that does make a difference. And when people see that, I do have an opportunity that I don't have to go to DC or LA or Austin or something to have a prominent career in a field that's right here locally, that's a need for everywhere. I mean, those things are important. So I appreciate what you do and what you have done for GWAL in our community here, and hopefully others will take note and do the same.
Awesome. Well, I will put information for you in the description, YouTube, so that if anybody wants to get a hold of Bill at the Office of Military Affairs at UNCW, and then while you're at it, why don't you subscribe while you're there? So
we'll do.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate the time. Thanks.